Hello, Matthew.
Hello, it's good to be with you, Mirabai, on the occasion of your book's reappearance with the new motherhood.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
this.
congratulations. There it
Thank you
is.
so much. Here we go. The showings of Julian of Norwich with this. It's pretty much the same translation as before, but I did shift the language a bit to be more gender inclusive and to really emphasize Julian's gorgeous word of wanting. But I think the primary and significant changes are this gorgeous cover by Aaron Currier and a foreword by Father Richard Rohr. But otherwise, it's very much the translation that I did 10 years ago that you're so familiar with, Matthew. And I just can't think of anyone I would rather have a conversation with right now on the occasion of the reemergence of this book. And it's also a time of the publication of this gorgeous book, Matthew Fox Essential Writings on Creation Spirituality, put out by our friends at Orbis Books. It's such a treasure. I had the great honor of reading the manuscript and endorsing it, and it's just everything that I want in one compendium. So that is a treasure.
Well, thank you. And as people know, you and I taught a course for 7 weeks on Julian of Norwich, and you never have too much of Julian. She has so much to say to us today. So I'm delighted that you have this new publication that puts her in our hands once again, because I think she's really ready to talk deep to us today.
Well, apparently so, because, it was very obvious when you and I did that course, that 7 week course on Julian in the time of the pandemic, because we were in the middle of the pandemic at the time. I think it was 2020, right, when we did
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And and there were so many clear parallels about Julian as an anchor, as turning inward, sheltering in place, and she lived through multiple rounds of the plague, the Black Death in Europe in the Middle Ages. And there were so many parallels, but now we're sort of moving out of a pandemic phase into a more endemic phase of this COVID-19 virus. But we've been so deeply influenced by that plague experience, and there are so many other ways that she speaks to us ongoingly. Julian's radically optimistic theology, her vision of the motherhood of God, her vision of the entire cosmos as a small round hazelnut in the palm of God's hand. There are many ways I think that we can relate and draw guidance from her right now. So maybe we could start with something that I've heard you speak about, Matthew, about the cosmological view, the vastness of the cosmos, and the smallness of Earth, and how incredibly inspiring that is rather than terrifying. Well, maybe and a little terrifying too.
Well, awe, by definition, I think, has some terror to it. Rilke, the poet, says that terror and beauty go together. Terror and beauty go together. And so, um, we want a certain amount of terror in our lives, not too much, but what Thomas Aquinas calls chaste fear, uh, holy fear. And that's really, I think, the meaning behind the biblical phrase of the fear of God.
Yeah,
It's
me
not
too.
meant to be about a punitive father, but it is meant to be about the greatness of an awesome experience. And Julian, of course, is is a champion of that, because she's such a champion of finding God in nature. That, as she says, God is the goodness in nature.
Mm,
And this is where the pandemic is not going to go away with Julian, insofar as we know, the 14th century pandemic experience turned a lot of people into being afraid of nature, you see.
mm.
And this has stayed with us. The over emphasis in Western Christianity on redemption, I think it really happened, and I'm not alone. Thomas Berry says the creation spiritual tradition was really cut short by 14th century pandemic. And this is where Julian just shines, because she did not fall into that pessimism and that fear, that kind of unchaste fear,
Right.
what it kind of call unchaste fear, that it went from awe to genuine fear of death that kind of took over the Western psyche. And it comes up very strong among the Protestant reformers in the 16th century. And Julian is such a balanced but deep lover, as you say, of the whole cosmos. So she had that vision, which is named in the cover of my Julian book, and which is sitting behind me, the original painting, but where there you go, where the hazelnut glowed. And what is this? This is all that is created. In other words, the whole universe. But it looks so fragile, she said, it'll fall apart. No, her answer was, is kept together by love. So that's just an incredible message that love keeps the universe together. And we need to know that, we humans, because we're just a small corner of the universe, very tiny, on a very tiny and special planet. But here we are waging war again in Europe, and our capacity for violence seems to know no end, unless we can put it up against this big picture of the sacredness of our existence and the new science that has taken us 13.8 billion years to get here, and that here is a very special place. So why don't we just chill out on all of our projections and violence and anger, and learn to appreciate what's around us and within us. And I think that was Jesus' whole message. The kingdom of God is among you. It's already here. You don't have to travel out to space for it, but we have to change our insides so that we can take delight in it. And I think that was Julian's basic message too.
Yeah, because delight is such a good word, Matthew, because that was what she used again and again, different versions of the word delight and mirth and friendliness and courtesy and warmth and
Right. And she
all of.
invented the word enjoy in English. She
Oh,
invented
that's
the word.
right. That's
Yeah, yeah,
English was evolving before her
exactly.
eyes, and
Exactly. And she helped evolve it.
the first woman to write in English. Not everybody
Exactly.
knows that.
And isn't it interesting? A woman had to invent the word enjoy.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's go there for a minute. What about the feminine? I mean, you as a, you know, a white man in the 21st century who's had such a huge and profound influence on an entire generation of lovers of God, have been the biggest champion I know of feminism and what has been called sometimes mystical feminism, and you have spoken out so coherently about the patriarchy. So how Julian's radical and revolutionary in naming God as mother in this text. What do you have to reflect on the motherhood of God with regard to Julian and anything else that
Well,
comes up?
others talk about the motherhood of God. Hildegard of Bingen did, and Meister Eckhart did before Julian. Certainly Mechtilde Magdeburg did.
Yes.
So they all preceded Julian, but no one developed it, motherhood of God, more richly and more diversely, more creatively than did Julian. No one until the late 20th century, until feminism kind of exploded as an intellectual tradition again. So Julian is just outstanding in her development. As you know, she treats the motherhood of God not only regarding the creator. So she says, God is delighted to be our mother and God is delighted to be our father. But also, as you know, Jesus, she talks about the second person of the Trinity as a mother. Jesus is our mother. And of course, she defines motherhood too in terms of compassion and being there. That motherly love is surest, she says.
Mhm.
And she applies those elements, those virtues to Jesus himself, which I think is accurate. And of course, bringing compassion forward, like Jesus in Luke 6, be you compassionate as created in heaven's compassion. Compassion is definitely the feminine side of the divine. It comes from the word for womb, after all, both in Hebrew and Arabic. So,
Yes.
and then of course, there's the Christ of wisdom, and wisdom is is feminine. Over my right shoulder is Kuan Yin. So, and that's wisdom from the East. And of course, Mary represents wisdom, and Sophia and Hokmah, both are feminine words in Greek and in Hebrew. So the banishment of wisdom in the modern age is a real important issue, because we reduced the meaning of learning in the university to being a place to find your job in a man-made world, whereas originally the university, even in the late 12th century, was a place to find a place in the universe and
Mm.
in the cosmos. There we're back to Julian's experience of the nut again. So there's so much of the feminine playing in Julian's work, but also in our scriptures. But this was lost in the modern era, and certainly in Protestantism. And I mean, several of the books in the Bible that the Catholic Church held on to, the Book of Wisdom, for example, is one, and a couple others are very feminist and were applied to Mary. Mary really represents archetypally the goddess in the West. And so to have this rise again in Julian in so wonderful a way is not only a gift, but it's a necessity in our time,
Mm.
because, as you say, patriarchy has just gone overboard, and the idea that we're going to solve problems by making war on one another. I do think one of the silver linings in this current Ukraine war is that we're literally getting war in our living room every night, and it's beginning to work on people. Hey, this isn't a very good way to solve differences, is it? In fact, it's horrible. So we have to get in touch with that experience of horror and grief and let that change us. And part of the change we have to do is to move beyond patriarchy to a healthier masculinity on the one hand, but also to inviting in on an equal basis the divine feminine and the archetypal feminine, if you will. And it's a strong feminine. And Julian is strong. I mean, she lived through this plague. And as you say, she probably lost a husband and a child in the process, but she doesn't whine about it. There's no whining in her entire book that I catch up on. She's not at all a victim. In fact, she took up pen and paper and said, I'm going to write the first damn book by a woman in English. I mean, there's a strength there. But it's not a bravado strength. It's a strength of perseverance. It's a strength of, of a mother.
And she allowed herself first to feel it, I think. I mean, we
Mhm.
have, as you know, almost no biographical information about Julian, and she does not give us autobiographical information, except she lets it slip early on in the showings
Mhm.
that when she had her near-death experience, which she writes about at the beginning of the book, um, in which she had these visions of Christ, these 17 showings, she said, I had nothing left to live for. This
Mhm.
is partly what helps me to conclude that she had lost her family, because statistically speaking, half the population, up to half the population, was eradicated by this virus, by this plague. So it's very likely that she did lose a lot of people she loved, but especially maybe her husband and child. And so she admits that she had nothing left to live for, and she was letting herself go. She didn't care whether she lived or died at that moment. And I think that's important to also acknowledge, that her incredibly radical optimism and her strength and her determination to write down everything that she learned that came through her, for the benefit of all beings. She says that over and over again. This wasn't for me alone. This was for all of us. But she had to first feel her feelings, and I think that's part of the feminine. We see this war unfolding right now in the Ukraine, and we are heartbroken when we see the bombing of a maternity hospital and all of the images, and read about it, and the bravery of people. It cracks open our hearts, and I think that's part of the feminine. The patriarchy has armor around its heart so that it can just get the facts straight and fix it.
mm,
But there's something about the feminine, and Julian models this so beautifully, that lets it all in and that
mm,
acknowledges that God's heart is broken
mm,
for the brokenness of the world.
mm, mm. Yeah, I think that's very important contribution to talk about that, and the importance of feelings, and again, in a patriarchal world, you're supposed to distance yourself from your feelings. Boys are from the time they're very young, and that just won't do. Not anymore. Even feelings about Mother Earth, you see, we can't distance ourselves from the suffering that's going on in the oceans and the forests and the soil and the other animals, that all of which is being brought upon us by climate change and by humanity ignoring Mother Earth. And so I think that's part of the Divine Mother too, is and of course that's part of wisdom, isn't it? To ask how healthy our behaviors are, to ask the questions about values and therefore about behavior and morality, common morality. And it's just getting, I think, plainer and plainer that a lot of our behavior is unsustainable, to put it in scientific language, and is terrorizing and self-defeating. Uh, uh, and we're killing ourselves as well as the planet. So do we hate ourselves? Now, Adrienne Rich, writes about motherhood, and she says that there's a fatalistic self-hatred that accompanies patriarchy, is fatalistic self-hatred.
Mm.
And Julian's writing is the opposite of that. She's talking about healthy love, self-love. And Jesus was the opposite of that too. He said, love others as you love yourself. He didn't say, so, he's presuming that there's healthy self-love going on. But that's, what can I say? That's a presumption we can't take for granted anymore, because I do think there's a lot of nihilism and a lot of self-hatred, but because we're at the edge of this patriarchal journey, I think, and the big question is, will we survive? Will Mother Earth survive as we know her? She will survive because she's much bigger than we are. But will we bring down so much of her giftedness, the forest,
Mm.
the other creatures with us? That's horrible to contemplate. So yeah, I really do see a lot of our struggle today is very much around an improper understanding of masculinity, and then this cultural bubble of patriarchy that distorts things, and it distorts our education, schools, which don't dwell on values and or feelings certainly either, and and um, and don't make way for the feminine consciousness that men and women are both capable of.
That's
But
right.
we have to celebrate that. And there's just no room for wisdom in 99% of education in the West these days. It's all about knowledge, and knowledge alone is killing the planet.
Yes.
So all these issues that Julian brings up, they're archetypal. And I
Yeah.
think they're coming back to haunt us 7 centuries later now, and in a big way. So this is why we need someone like Julian. And I like the fact that her book is as short as it is, that she's not piling on all kinds of intellectual paraphernalia. She's really quite focused on these visions she had and on the message that is coming through to her, and as you say, through her to all of us.
Mm. Uh, And may it be so that what Christ the Mother said to Julian over and over in this text was that all will be well, and all will be well, and every kind of thing shall be well.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Matthew Fox. Much love to you.
Thank you.